Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Resuscitation Academy webinar for May. We are excited to have some really tremendous guests with us today and some really timely news for everybody. This is our annual update from CARES, the Cardiac Arrest Registry to Enhance Survival. And we're going to have two guests with us today. On right now is Rabab Al-Araji. Rabab is a senior epidemiologist with CARES and it's been with CARES for a number of years and will be leading much of today's discussion. And then we'll be joined by Brian McNally, the executive director from CARES, in a few minutes. Brian will jump in and add a bit more to the conversation, I'm sure, as he always does. He's a fantastic spokesperson for CARES and is passionate about the topic, so it should be a really exciting time. And this is cutting edge data, right? The annual report came out just days ago, so many of you probably haven't seen it yet. So it'll be a really nice walkthrough of kind of what to expect and what to know about the annual report and kind of where CARES is headed. And hopefully we can all learn something there. So Rabab, if you are ready, welcome to the Resuscitation Academy webinar and take it away from here.
Thanks so much. Hello, everyone. My name is Rabab Al-Araji. Thanks for joining. So for today's call, we're going to be presenting the 2024 data overview, national report, and trend data followed by CARES research. We wanted the audience to hear from the end users how they're using CARES nationally before we review the 2024 data.
Really just doing a few simple things can make a huge impact on whether or not somebody will survive a cardiac arrest event, and anyone has the skills. Kids even as young as 4 years old can call 911. Really anyone can save a life, and it's these hands that are going to do that.
All of us, no matter what walk of life we're approaching it from, need to know CPR and support the learning of CPR because we're all susceptible to just what I experienced. And my utmost gratitude to those who saved my life.
We use CARES data to really look at our cardiac arrest outcomes from a systems perspective, tracking our cardiac arrest outcomes over time. And it's really allowed us to have a significant increase in survival over time.
Like in Palm Beach County, we have many hospitals, and I get to look and drill down to each individual hospital, and you see outliers.
The best thing about CARES, and the reason why it's such a big deal, is that it allows us to compare ourselves to other states, where before they were all different metrics that people were using. CARES really levels the field and allows you to say, how are we doing, and compare yourself to others.
If you're not collecting even basic information on your team's performance, and your team is not just the ambulance crews that you're directing, but it is your receiving hospitals, it's your 911 center, it's the community, it's the neighborhoods where cardiac arrests are happening. You can't make intelligent and informed decisions, and you can't figure out if what you did worked or not.
I think the first question I would ask is your community a CARES community? I think that's really an important part. Without that data, we don't know how to target resources.
We need help from our state partners to really command, make happen that this is part of the process of documenting EMS care.
The Carroll Act is an enormous step, but it's still a hard lift for states, and there are those holdouts. With the Carroll Act, essentially Congress has said this matters for the country.
CARES has scrapped for decades to try to make incremental changes, and the support of something like the Carroll Act and the funding that comes with it now is able to make the information that we get far richer, and our ability to use that data and that information far better so that the changes we can make are easier to do and will be bigger in magnitude.
It's a great time for agencies to collect EMS data, hospital data, and TCPR data so that they can optimize care in the pre-hospital environment and in the hospital environment and maximize survival in communities.
It only becomes more valuable the more people and organizations participate.
We're taking a 1-hour class, hands-only CPR. We're calling it common sense CPR. And we're just doing calling 911, how to do good quality chest compressions, and how to use AED.
You know, I'm sitting in my house right now, right? And we know that 70% of out-of-hospital cardiac arrests will occur in the home. And I think that's why it becomes so personal and so important for everyone to know how to call 911, how to perform CPR, how to use an AED, and most importantly, to just recognize that a cardiac emergency has happened.
The CARES registry helps us understand whether some of those early interventions are being utilized, if people know about them. It helps us to identify where we need to focus efforts so that we can save more lives, especially in areas where we know that more people are dying because they don't have the resources.
The mantra of measure and improve is one of the core mantras at the Resuscitation Academy, and through our work with CARES, we really have an opportunity to use a really well-validated tool for that measurement piece, and then allow a community to compare themselves against other communities and find the areas where they can improve within their own community to result in more survivors going home at the end of the day.
I was in the YMCA gymnasium working out, and I became suddenly unconscious without any symptoms, without any warning.
The gym people knew what to do. They saved his life because they knew when to call 911, they started CPR, did the things in the chain of survival that we know really work.
My uncle, who I just had dinner with last night, and his amazing family is a survivor from cardiac arrest. And it was because of the amazing bystander CPR.
You know, the Red Cross has a long history of being a nonpartisan humanitarian organization that is focused on alleviating human suffering wherever they find it, and to do the best we can to be as inclusive as possible, and to not take sides. And I think that's something that we have in common with CARES, because CARES is essentially a data gathering tool that tries to understand what's happening in a community and then reach in and try to figure out how to make it better.
When Ohio CARES started in 2016, we were able to actually see how we do as a state and not just a handful of EMS agencies that participated. So Governor DeWine was able to use this information to sponsor an initiative called Every Minute Counts, because every minute really does count, and to drive where the minutes matter most, and that is in the provision of bystander CPR.
In San Diego County, a little less than 50% of cardiac arrest victims receive CPR. That's something we recognize from CARES data, and we compared it to other cities throughout the U.S.
We see a huge value in CARES. It really allows us to track how we're doing with cardiac arrest care in the city of Chicago, and has really led to significantly increased survival rates in cardiac arrest.
You know, here in Denver, we have seen the impact of CARES, and we know that we continue to see the impact because we can again track our data.
Wow, Bob, that's an awesome video. I haven't seen that before. That was truly fantastic. I mean, I'm in it, but the more amazing part to me was seeing Art Yancey's story, right? And, you know, Art is the longtime EMS medical director at Emory EMS and an emergency physician or a Grady EMS and an emergency physician at Emory. And, I knew about his event, but it's awesome to see him doing so well and to be a product of the system that he worked in and created for so many years. And then to be a survivor of that system is just amazing. So that's a fantastic way to tell the story. Really great job.
Thank you. We're excited about the work taking place all over the country. So we'll dig into what we found in the 2024 data set next. Okay, so data overview. So last year, over 2,600 EMS agencies and hospitals contributed data to the registry for a total of 137,119 cases. With the amazing work of the CARE State Coordinator Group, we were able to achieve a lost follow-up rate of 0.2%. Currently, CARES covers 37 state-based registries plus 40 community sites in 13 additional states, representing a catchment area of approximately 186 million people, or 56% of the US population. To date, the registry has captured over 1 million records. So the CARES population catchment has steadily expanded over the years, reflecting growing participation and broader national coverage in cardiac arrest surveillance. Although the CARES catchment area has grown, the number of cases have gone down due to a lower incidence rates. Rates spiked during COVID-19 but began to decline after the peak, likely reflecting recovery in healthcare access and overall stability. Over here, you see that in 2023 and 2024, there was a decline in drug deaths. This demonstrates progress against the COVID-19 pandemic. As per the previous figure by the CDC, this graph illustrates the trend in CARES drug overdose percentages from 2019 to 2024, showing a steady increase during the COVID years, peaking at 7.3 in 2023, and then declining in 2024 down to 5.6, suggesting a potential shift in factors influencing overdose rates post-pandemic. So next, we'll go over some arrest characteristics. In 2024, 63% of CARES patients were male, with a median age of 66. 97.3 were adults, and females had a higher median age of arrest of 68 versus 65 for males. In 2024, 83.8% of adult out-of-hospital cardiac arrests were presumed cardiac, while pediatric cases were more varied, with 43.9% presumed cardiac, 39.2% due to respiratory asphyxia, and 8.5% due to drowning. This figure shows how the cause of out-of-hospital cardiac arrest varies by age. While presumed cardiac causes were the most common overall, especially among older adults, pediatric patients were more likely to experience arrest from respiratory issues. Drug overdose was a major cause among younger adults, particularly those aged 19 to 49. This figure shows unadjusted survival by arrest cause. Overdose-related cases had the highest chances of survival at 19%, and exsanguination or hemorrhage had the lowest at 2.6%. 71.4% of out-of-hospital cardiac arrests occur at home. Due to less frequent bystander response and witnessing, survival is lower at 8.9% compared to public settings where survival is closer to 21%. About half of cardiac arrests were unwitnessed, 50.2%, while 37.5 were seen by bystander and 12.3 by a 911 responder. Survival was significantly higher when arrests were witnessed, 16% for bystander witnessed and 18% for 911 responder witnessed, compared to just 4.5% for unwitnessed arrests. Only 18% of patients had a shockable rhythm at the time of arrest, while 82% had unshockable rhythms, with asystole being the most common at 50.6%. Shockable rhythms were more likely in bystander witness arrests than unwitnessed ones. The next slides will focus on data related to the chain of survival, early activation of 911, early CPR, and early defibrillation. This data highlights the importance of early 911 activation. Survival drops with longer EMS response times, especially for witnessed ventricular ventricular fibrillation or ventricular tachycardia arrest. Bystander CPR further boosts survival by 5 to 6%, showing the strong impact of combining quick response with early intervention. This data highlights the second link in the chain of survival, early bystander CPR. Bystander CPR was given in 41.7% of cases, more often in witness arrest than unwitnessed arrest, 50% versus 35.2%. Patients who received bystander CPR had higher rates of return of ROSC, hospital admission, and survival to discharge. This data covers the third link in the chain of survival, early defibrillation. Survival was highest at 47% when defibrillation was done by bystanders, compared to 28% when done by first responders or EMS. These last few slides will present some additional outcomes data. In 2024, 43% of patients were pronounced on scene after resuscitative efforts were terminated in the pre-hospital setting. The rate of survival to hospital admission was 25.7%, and the rate of survival to hospital discharge was 10.5%. Over here, we have the 2024 CARES Utstein Survival Report showing 33.4% Utstein survival to hospital discharge and an Utstein bystander survival rate of 37.6%. The CARES Hospital Survival Report shows 45.7% of transported patients survived to hospital admission and 18.4% survived to discharge, with higher survival for those with sustained ROSC, 35.4%, and those transferred from another facility, 48.5%. The next few slides show the marked variation in out-of-hospital cardiac arrest patient outcomes and bystander intervention rates. We've plotted the data for the 165 EMS agencies with greater than or equal to 200 CARES cases in 2024. The red dotted line in each figure denotes the national average, and the gray vertical lines indicate quartile cut points. There was a more than seven-fold difference in overall survival, with a range of 3.6 to 21.7%. The national overall survival rate was 10.5%. Utstein survival ranged from 0 to 70.6%, and the national Utstein survival rate was 33.4%. Lastly, there was a more than five-fold difference in bystander CPR rates, with a range of 11.5 to 84.6%. The national bystander CPR rate was 41.7%. Next, we'll go through national report and some trend data. The bar graph illustrates the bystander CPR intervention rates for out-of-hospital cardiac arrest across 3 consecutive years, 2022 to 2024. This slight upward trend indicates a positive progression in bystander CPR and public AED readiness and response over the 3-year period. Survival to hospital discharge in patients with good CPC score also gradually increased over the 3-year period. Similarly, Utstein survival and Utstein bystander survival increased slightly between 2022 to 2024. From 2019 to 2024, out-of-hospital cardiac arrest outcomes and interventions showed a sharp decline in 2020 due to COVID-19. Bystander CPR dropped slightly from 41.2% to 40.5%, and public AED use fell from 12.3% to 8.9%. Survival rates declined as well. Although rates of CPR and AED use recovered by 2024, survival improvements remain modest, highlighting the pandemic's lasting impact and the need for stronger public training. The 2024 annual report will showcase data highlights, survival stories, and future directions, and it's currently published on the CARES website. Finally, I wanted to present the brief overview of the research highlights and ongoing CARES research projects, as well as the summary of the publications in 2024. Recognizing the value of surveillance data is essential for informing public health decisions and driving local quality improvement efforts to enhance survival outcomes. There are currently 53 ongoing data sharing proposals, 41 national data sharing proposals, and 12 state data sharing proposals. And there were 18 publications in 2024. These are the publications of 2024, and the CARES publication list is on the website as well. We'll go over some research highlights that are published on the annual report as well. So Ohio statewide CARES registry expanded cardiac arrest data collection from individual EMS agencies to a coordinated regional system, increasing coverage from 10% to nearly 50% and improving return of spontaneous circulation and survival rates. Key to its success were strong leadership, dedicated coordination, and finding support, enabling data-driven initiatives like public CPR campaigns, despite ongoing funding challenges. Drug overdose-related out-of-hospital cardiac arrests account for about 8% of cases in the U.S., affecting younger patients who, despite lower rates of witness arrest, show higher survival and better neurological outcomes than non-overdose out-of-hospital cardiac arrests. However, overdose out-of-hospital cardiac arrest imposes a disproportionate economic burden due to premature disability and death, highlighting the urgent need for targeted public health interventions. With our next-gen platform, mapping capabilities will be enhanced using Tableau to publicly display cardiac arrest incidents, bystander CPR and AED use, and overdose-related arrests, increasing awareness and transparency. These visualizations will identify priority communities and guide quality improvements and enable spatial analysis to pinpoint survival gaps, optimize AED placement, and target CPR training. Next, I'm going to pass the baton on to Brian to talk about the NEMSIS data integration.
Thanks for Bob. Great job. I'm going to try to follow in your footsteps, but thanks for setting me up. So just a couple slides left, and then obviously, hopefully plenty of time for discussion. We want to show this map in terms of, you saw the map earlier with the 37 states, right, where we have state coordinators. This is really how we're going to move forward with trying to get each state mature that's not already mature, meaning 100% of EMS data and obviously respectable hospital data. So as states move to version 3.5 in NEMSIS, or National EMS Information System, those fields, our essential fields and cares, are harmonized with NEMSIS 3.5. So this is what we've been waiting for several years, to be able to now not just pull data from individual agencies, but to pull data from each of these respective state repositories. And you can see the progress that's been made here based on the shade in color. The darker states are states that are already providing us with state upload. The lighter shade are those that are sort of on deck. A couple are on hold. Obviously, the number of states that we're in the process of reaching out to. Our goal is to talk with all active states this year and to try to establish a timeline based on the state's needs, and really to try to look towards the next 24 months to try to bring on as many states. Ultimately, we'd like to have 50 points of contact, not 3,000, right, in terms of scaling this. So this will help with, we touch a lot of states, but, 56%, half of the house is painted. We're going to get the other half of the house painted, hopefully, a lot quicker than the first 20 years. So that's sort of the main message. Obviously, a lot of work, a lot of shout out to our data integration team, and Monica Rajdev, who leads that, and Frank Sloan and Charlie, who really drive this on a daily basis, and obviously working with the state coordinators. So it's a concerted effort. Our goal is to hopefully show a more robust map this time next year. Next slide, please.
Brian, that's moving pretty quickly, right? Because I remember last year there were not many states who were integrated, right?
Yeah, it's quickly might not be the right word, but it's definitely moving. It's moving forward, and I think we're happy with where things are at. There's a lot of there's a lot of steps. A lot of it is trying to prep a state, right? There's sort of homework that a state needs to do. Obviously, data agreement, legal stuff takes time. State government has a lot of other competing priorities, some other things. So we're really trying to use our regional coordinators to begin a lot of these conversations with our state coordinators and their respective IT teams. So yeah, it's definitely moving in the right direction. And like I said, hopefully we'll show a map. I think one of our challenges we always have to remind ourselves with CARES is we're always looking forward, and sometimes we don't look back, and you realize like a lot of progress has been made. So thanks for acknowledging that. The
It's definitely evolving and maturing. But thanks. Yeah. Next slide, please. Yeah, so we just submitted for year 3 the CARES CDC CARES expansion modernization grant, which is as a result of the CAREL Act funding that has been allowing us to do these 4 main activities you can see down here, right? National expansion, as we've talked about, these dedicated quality improvements, obviously our ongoing and even stronger relationship with Resuscitation Academy and CPR Lifelinks. The funding is allowing us to do this, to expand that model, expand the Lighthouse model, do a lot more dedicated training across the country, modernizing our software platform. Later this year, we'll be testing over the summer, but the idea is to get our minimally viable product, our next gen platform, in front of our end users. So there's going to be a lot of steps in terms of testing. And then focus groups, as well as training, obviously state coordinators and local coordinators over time. So a lot more to share there. Bob obviously alluded to some of the reports, the visualization piece being much more robust, but a lot more to show. And this is not something that stops, right? This is something that continues to evolve. So there'll be more to share. Our goal is to get this minimally viable product out, tested, and live later this year. So again, hopefully more to share in the next several months. And obviously, assisting priority communities. This slide was slightly different this time last year because we used the word disparity. We're using the word priority. It's semantics, but we're really trying to work with the same communities, putting resources where they're needed the most. And I think addressing the concerns, using survival as sort of driving how we're prioritizing, right? The bottom quartile, right? The bottom part of those bar charts that Bob went through earlier, right? There's a lot of variation. So we're trying to put resources in the form of scholarships or training or other things I'll talk about in a minute with CARES Prime, trying to put those limited resources where we think they're needed the most, to try to get folks closer to national average. The nice thing in the annual report is there's a lot of examples, right? We've shown the Chicago map before. Chicago's done great work. Detroit is now highlighted in this report in terms of they have historical data from many years ago that showed published data that they had 0 survivors in the early 2000s. When they started CARES, they were in the single digits, like 1.5%. The next year, they jumped to 3.5%. Now they're closer to 8%. So again, there's plenty of examples out there, but some of these larger communities that are publishing this and making it available, we want to work on trying to help more communities like that. And again, putting resources where we think they're needed the most. So we've just submitted 2 weeks ago for year 3. Year 3 would start, obviously, year 3 starts October 1st. This is a 5-year grant. Obviously, each year it has to be appropriated by Congress. So we've been doing a lot of advocacy as we do each year to try to make sure. Matter of fact, I was talking to Tom Ray before I got on a plane today about advocacy efforts with with Congress and senators in the state of Washington, as we're going to be reaching out to all our communities. So we've got a lot of support. We need to continue that advocacy effort with our partners. Public health is obviously changing. I don't need to state the obvious, but our goal is to continue to make sure that we can continue to work with as many communities as possible and maintain the funding stream. Next slide, please. I alluded to CARES Prime. Mike Carr should get credit for this. I know he's got a conflict, so he's not right now, but he came up with it. You always have to have a good acronym, but essentially our partners, we're collaborating. We've been collaborating with all these partners over time, but getting on a monthly call to talk about a data-driven approach to try to help where are there opportunities to help communities. So as an example, several months ago, we had several calls within a several-week time frame where we basically talked to counties in the state of California and said, here's your county-wide map, some of the maps that you saw earlier. Here's your incidence rate. Here's your bystander CPR rate. Here's your public access AED rate. Here's your overdose rate. Do you mind if we get on a call and talk with some of the partners to learn about what are the activities you're doing? How might these other partner organizations, particularly our training colleagues at Heart Association Red Cross, provide training, and definitely training, free training. This is not a 4-hour class. This is more close to a half-hour class, compression-only CPR, and trying to use a data-driven approach. Which part of the county do we think these training activities would be most beneficial? So a lot more. I think what we've learned over the last several months is getting on a monthly call. It raises awareness, and it's trying to help put together the measurement piece with the improvement piece. And again, trying to strengthen the partnerships here, but also trying to actually translate it into training, where training historically may have been difficult to provide for, or resource challenged. So again, we're very happy with this dialogue, and I think over time this will continue to mature. Next slide, please. So we wanted to put this on here. There's a scholarship for those, we're calling it CARES Prime Scholarship, but basically as a result of the CDC grant, trying to make this available for agencies that would have interest that might not normally be able to participate in the Resuscitation Academy for travel costs. We're trying to prioritize where we think the need is the greatest based on data. So there's only a limited number, but wanted to put this on there. I think the next slide may have a QR code. But wanted to let folks know this exists. And each year that we have funding, we're hoping to provide 50+ opportunities for several folks from individual agencies to travel. Obviously, these RAs are occurring across the country. So some of it's regional travel, some of it may be overnight travel, some maybe flights. It really depends. So the application process helps us understand where there's a desire. Again, we're going to be using working with our regional coordinators to push this information out, and trying to even look at a targeted approach of which agencies do we think might most benefit when there's a Resuscitation Academy in a specific region in the next 6 months, and kind of reach out. Passive would be sending out an email. Active would be trying to reach out to communities to see if they would have interest. So next slide, please. Yeah. Here's the QR code. So feel free to download it. And again, it's trying to allow agencies to benefit from the Resuscitation Academy that may not be able to because of resource or travel barriers. Obviously, CPR lifelinks as well. That's being taught in a hybrid approach. In terms of getting in front of folks at these a lot of these RAs is an additional day, but also providing an opportunity to go back and have the leadership that's gone through the course do training in a remote model. So again, really appreciate the efforts of our colleagues at with the RA, of course, and CPR Lifelinks. It's been really, really beneficial, and that's what the grant's allowed for. Next slide. I think we're coming to the end here. Yeah. So I'll stop there and turn it over to Andy, see if you have questions to us or just discussion. Thank you.
Yeah, no, fantastic. It's a great update, Brian. And our next Resuscitation Academy here in Seattle is in October, but we've got a number of events throughout the country over the summer and into the fall. So if you're interested, reach out, and we're happy to help connect and help to work on the scholarship side with you as well, and really plug in that program. I think is awesome because we have room for communities to join the program. So talk amongst your colleagues, and let's get people to Resuscitation Academies and drive improvement. Really great stuff. Brian, I know you have been, I'll say, neck deep in sort of generating this report and getting it out. I'm curious what you're most excited about in this year's report. And Rabab, the same thing to you. What sort of stands out to both of you as sort of being the takeaway, the headline, the thing that is exciting, having done this a number of times over the years? What's exciting to you this year?
Great. I think it's a great question. And I'll go first because I know Rabab, so then it'll be harder for Rabab to answer. Sorry, Rabab. We've talked about this. So I think collective, we could say, though I'll let obviously her chime in here, is we're back to 2019 statistics. I know that might not sound remarkable, but like it took this long to recover, right? You saw that's why we put those trend lines in there, right? Essentially, we're back to 2019 roughly, a slight increase in the bystander CPR rate, which is good, but essentially back to the same survival rate, back to the same, roughly the same public access fibrillation rate, and close to the same incidence rate. And I think that's, one of those earlier slides, you could see there's sort of a plateauing of cases, but you have to realize we've got increased footprint that's still going up, but a lot, right? 1 million plus people died, right, during COVID. That 1 to 2 year, 1.5 year period, depending on how you look at the data. Obviously, that's what we saw, right? A huge increase in the incidence rate. Opioid epidemic, right, was in there, and that thankfully is plateauing as well. So when you look at the data, that's maybe the most thing that jumps out and be like, thank God we're back to where we were, and hopefully the trend will continue to advance, because we really, 2019 basically, right? We all, we dropped precipitously. I mean, it's almost like looking at like recent headlines on the stock market, right? Huge drop, and then kind of recovery, but not in the same couple months, right? This was 4 years. And I think that's the part is, thankfully we can see with the data, and it's a large enough data set, right, that it kind of pans out, but also being able to tease out, and these are questions we've been, I mean, CDC released the report yesterday, right? So it's very timely to say, there was a precipitous drop. We can see that. Obviously, that's the graphic that, Rabab showed. So she may have some other ideas, but I think that would be what I'm most excited about, is that we're recovered, and now we can continue to move that trend line in the right direction. Yeah, so that's probably what jumps out at me the most. There's probably some other things where Bob could talk about, because she eats and breathes data.
Yeah, everything Brian said, but as well, I'm excited this year about having our the next gen software and our mapping capabilities. Just having the ability to visualize what's going on different geographic levels, and the fact that we currently have a GIS analyst on board, and it's easy to do this. I think that's been super exciting to see changes visually this year.
Yeah, and those maps have been, we've had them accessible for the last couple resuscitation academies and handed them out to the communities, and really has informed the conversation in a way that we weren't able to have before with these communities about sort of where are there opportunities for improvement in their own community, in their own area, and really dial into their data. It's been super cool, and the maps are just tremendous. You guys have done a fantastic job of getting those out. How can people get their own map if they don't have one yet, haven't seen theirs yet?
I'm glad you brought that up. So it's sort of like, okay, it's a secret. Everyone on this call can hear about it. But so honestly, the data science team that we work with, right? We have a dedicated GIS analyst. We have a director of data science, and Bob, myself, Mike Carr are part of this team. But essentially, we're talking about the process that allows these agencies more recently to get these maps that are participating in the RA. It's a manual process, right? So what we're looking for in the future, just conceptually get your arms around, is that when you log into CARES Next Gen, if everything goes as planned, you'll not just see the existing reports. Over time, all of our existing reports will go from a legacy sort of report to putting all our reports in dashboards, putting all of this in Tableau. The mapping piece is new, right? We don't have current maps within CARES. We've created maps over time, but it's been sort of a one agency at a time approach. The goal is to be able to integrate that when you log in at CARES and you have ideally at least 3 years of data, enough data that we could begin to map it, that we would try to quote, we never like to use the word automate, but trying to make this a more seamless process that we can help put these maps in front of folks and not have to have a one-off request. That's what we're working on right now, but it's sort of moving from our data analyst or our GIS analyst of creating these maps sort of one at a time to being able to figure out how can we allow for this process, the steps. Literally, that's the goal of what we're working towards. The long-term sort of vision is that, in our annual report that Bob just mentioned, if you log in, we've had a state table we call a state public reporting table, where states that opt in, the vast majority that have at least 50% of the state population, have the opportunity to contribute sort of metrics across the line. What's the bystander CPR rate at state level? What's the overall survival rate? What's the unseen survival rate? Taking those metrics and putting that on a map. So we're looking at conceptually two main maps in the future that we'd like to make public. Public would be states opting in to this process. So one map would be essentially that table. You click on the state of California and you'll have summary metrics, and then you'll have national metrics. So you can see on a national map, you click on the state, you can see the data come in front of you. The second map conceptually would be you click on the state of California if they've opted in, and you can click on LA County, and then you click on the individual, census tracts within that county, so that publicly this data is being made more transparent. This is going to take time because this is going to be an opt-in process. But just like Heart Rescue really helped elevate cares from us working with individual agencies to then starting with individual states, there was a lot of lessons learned. This would be sort of the next iteration of getting states comfortable with Hawaii. The reason we showed the Hawaii data is because Hawaii is the first state that's opted in and given permission to say, yep, we're fine with our 4 main islands of population to put this out there, because conceptually it was 4 emails that Dr. Libby Char helped broker. Obviously, in other states, there's a lot more than 4 islands or 4 counties. So we just need to be thoughtful in that approach. But we've had other states that have begun to say, how can we get our map, out there? And this will be a work in progress. The technical piece of integrating it, and then the permissions piece of getting it out. But we believe making this information available to the public and making it down to, like, what neighborhood do you live in? Let's help figure out, what is the bystander CPR rate in your neighborhood? What's the public access defibrillation rate? What's the incidence overdose? Obviously, these maps are a starting point. I know we alluded to, future, could we use information to figure out where to put an AED? Those are things that, we're going to focus on getting this MVP product out and use these 4 maps. But there's obviously a lot more that can create it. And that's the nice thing, is we're getting out of the report generating business. Like when we write a report in CARES legacy or current state, it'd take several months to write the report, code it, and then test it and put it out. Now we're going to have an interface with Tableau where we can develop a dashboard. It still takes time, but a lot quicker and more responsive. There'll be greater benchmarking opportunities and greater visualization, and again, the mapping. So I think that is the other exciting part, is where we're going. We're back to pre-COVID, but we see other things in the future that I think can help communities really put resources where they're needed the most and have a better understanding of what's happening at a more granular level.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. And you're literally, I'm sure you haven't even read the questions in the Q&A, and you've answered them, especially with that last question, is sort of how much can we expect in the future to drill down into the data and be able to understand, at a granular level where these differences are, and where there's an opportunity to impact in a community. And I think that the desire is to, have as much of that available as possible, both from your perspective, from our perspective at the RA, from the public's perspective, and I think, many EMS systems. And I agree with you, applaud Dr. Char for being a leader in this area and bringing Hawaii along with her. And that's just a fantastic effort, and super, super cool to see their data in there. Wonderful to see Chicago and the tremendous improvement in Chicago, right? And to see these leaders sort of willing to put those stories out there, even when some of the challenges have been pretty substantial, and talk about them, just really fantastic. And the report this year, for those that haven't looked at it yet, is just packed with these stories, and they're just tremendous stories of improvement and really, really great work by everybody involved. So pretty awesome.
Yeah, and thanks. And a shout out to the team that obviously a lot of people contributed to this, but the report, the 20th anniversary, really very appreciative of the team's effort of getting this out, and getting it out very timely. This is the busiest time of year with the national reporting process, grant renewals. So really appreciate it. Like, people were working literally a weekend ago of trying to get this posted, and a lot of steps to put it on the website. So really happy with everyone's efforts, and please feel free to share it. That's obviously the goal. We want people to recognize what's happening in these communities, and the implementation piece, right? And I think that's essentially what this partnership, right, with Resuscitation Academy, CPR Lifelinks, This has been intact for a long time, but the grant really allows us to have a much more formal relationship, and we want people to see all of this as a quality improvement effort, right? It's bringing this together so that you're moving from step one, measurement, to step two, looking at your data, and then acting on it, step three. And this is really where the tire hits the road. So I think the modernization of the platform will help guide, at a local level where some of these interventions can occur in a more targeted approach. But having the training and having the expertise, that's super important. Again, we're happy we recovered from the COVID hangover,
Right.
and hopefully the opioid line will keep going in the other direction. But as Rabab pointed out, right, it's the highest survival rate, so that can influence survival, not in a bad way. There's less people that are developing cardiac arrest, but a lot of those are likely, it's a more favorable outcome, likely because some of them are pseudo arrests, or some of them do respond very quickly to brief interventions.
Question in the Q&A from a good friend of the Resuscitation Academy, Mo Daya. Can you, and this is my question as well, I agree, Mo, can you talk a little bit about some of these communities who are really pushing the envelope? Mo quotes 80% Utstein survival. There were some very high Utstein survival rates this year. What are any idea what's behind this, what the features are, what they're doing right that the rest of us can get behind and duplicate?
Sure, great question. And I need to go back now that the report's out, go back and take a look.
Yeah.
We always look at the outlier. Obviously, we wouldn't identify them publicly, but I think those type of communities that are often on the leading edge, often are, sharing their experience. I think a lot of it comes down to, without stating the obvious, right? A lot of that often is driven by the combination of both community training and TCPR. And I think TCPR is clearly the secret sauce in a lot of communities, particularly the underperforming communities, and in the future, really, it's not just compliance, right? Is your bystander CPR rate at national average? The next metrics in the future that really need to be focused on is timeliness to CPR, timeliness to fibrillation. We capture that. That's something that will likely get hopefully more in front of folks. A lot of these fields are supplemental. The times are always supplemental because some communities it's challenging to collect that. But those type of that's telling the other part of the story. The qualitative metric, how often are you performing this activity, but then the quantitative, how quickly. And I think those 80% communities, in my mind, are likely they've got a very robust, combination of community-based training on top of a very robust TCPR with QA, right? Not just doing the training, but looking at these calls and feeding it back to the dispatcher, expecting, like our colleagues in Seattle have said for the last 3 decades, right? Every call is a cardiac arrest until proven otherwise.
Yep, definitely. And on the topic of telecommunicator CPR, right, there's a question just coming into the chat right now. TCPR is not a mandatory module in CARES. I don't know what the percentage of communities who report their TCPR, but I think the more who report, the more are encouraged to look at their TCPR rates and dive into the details there, right? And understand the details. And I'm curious what the future of that looks like from the CARES perspective.
Yeah, great question. To answer it, it is an optional field or an optional module. There's a lot of labor involved. We see in the future that labor cost, we believe, can come down. We're looking at, there's obviously folks in this space right now that have AI tools to try to abstract some of this data. It's not present state in terms of rolling this out, but we're looking at, how can we decrease the burden associated with listening to these calls? Can that be, can be a process that this information could be abstracted, that there's less human time or burden. And I think that's what we all think of AI is, right? Or an algorithm, if you can validate it, right? It's a repetitive task. You're trying to save, human labor. You're not going to accidentally launch a nuclear missile. This is trying to fill out a form that, some of these calls, and I know Micah is likely on, or Nwandi is on the call, they can speak to this, right? Some of these calls to abstract are 20, 30 minutes, right? It's a lot of time. And that's what is the biggest barrier. Clearly, more communities are we first started the module, I want to say it's about 10 years ago. There are a handful of communities. There are some states now that are trying to mandate, that not mandate data collection per se, but mandate training. So we've seen certain states, Michigan has had a big presence in terms of doing this in a number of communities across the state. We don't audit that process because we don't have the bandwidth. But again, that's something we will come back to, or we'll continue to look at, is if we can decrease the burden with the abstraction piece, that's going to increase the compliance. That to me is where that you're going to see a lot of improvement, because a lot of communities, right, when you don't look at metrics, everyone's assuming that people are getting CPR in 90 seconds, and that is not the case across the country. I think we know that. So, but part of it is, if you don't know, if you're not looking, you're sort of in a black box. We need to remove that black box, and data burden is the biggest barrier right now. So trying to solve that is hopefully we'll see opportunities. But I can tell you that we're looking at trying to decrease that burden through this type of algorithmic or AI approach. But it's going to take some time.
Yeah, that sounds fantastic, and I think would be a huge improvement, and really, really cool. Do we see a pretty strong correlation between communities who participate in TCPR, do a good job, and then sort of the outcomes piece? I think that would be an interesting sub-analysis to look at, right? Is how much can we attribute to the telecommunicator CPR piece directly related to the outcomes, right? I think it's huge, and we've got some data here that promotes it being huge, right? But it'd be interesting to look at a bigger data set.
Yeah, and that's exactly right. People have reached out. I think the easy answer right now to say is, since we're not auditing this, because again, a bandwidth issue on our end as well, or people are using this tool organically. Some communities may be entering every CARES case. Other communities may be doing a sampling or do it episodically. We think anyone that's trying to work on this, even if it's a part of a subset, that's a great place to start. But hopefully over time, we can figure out how to decrease the burden of getting those timestamps in. That I think will help a great deal. To me, time to first compression and time to first compression and time to defibrillation, obviously when it's a shockable event, those metrics are those are the metrics that really need to tell the rest of the story, and that information will likely be something you'll be seeing in a future dashboard. Again, communities do collect this, but it's not across the board. Times historically are challenging, but I think if we can put this information in a more formal report, it might encourage greater compliance with those metrics. But said this from day one, KISS principle. And what we're always very cautious of is, right, if you ask for one more field, that may prevent one more community from participating. So this idea of having essential, need to know versus nice to know. Nice to know is supplemental, and you offer that. About 85% of communities that participate in CARES are entering these supplemental fields. Maybe not all of them, but so it offers that flexibility. If you think of our colleagues in Korea, I've looked at conceptually using their Korean cardiac arrest registries by Korean CDC. They've shown using like professional version GPT, they can fill out their data form when they've trained their model to feed in their data dictionary, feed in an EMS record, feed in a hospital record. Now, if you're left with 5% of cases that you're not mapping, now you've got a lot less. You're using your abstractors to look at those cases. That's not where we're at today, but that long-term is something that we're looking at in terms of how can we pull the hospital data in, right? We spend a lot of energy, the state coordinators spend a lot of energy getting this information in. And that's probably the biggest difference when you look at when CARE started, ROC started essentially the same time. ROC was, maximizing data elements. A lot of, research coordinators, you want to ask as many questions as possible. CARES is like minimizing it. How do you, if you can pull in more data and decrease the burden in that process, you can get closer to a much more robust registry, or even bordering on like a research model. And again, that's conceptually what I think our Korean colleagues have kind of shown. If you can pull this information in and use less human involvement and validate that this data is accurate and complete, you could begin to think of pulling in more fields. Leave you with one example. So one of the supplemental fields in the hospital is, did the patient get cardiac catheterization? What was the time of their cardiac catheterization? So if I look in a Grady record, the hospital I work at, to go and say, okay, I found the CARES case. Now I'm scrolling through pages of information to find where is the cath time. That might take me 3, 4, 5 minutes. If you train the model, it finds it right away. And again, that's the concept of, this is the difference between why communities are not sometimes able to enter all these supplemental fields. But the future, which will take time, is how do we decrease the data burden? We've always been focused on minimizing it, but can we decrease it further and allow, like, again, TCPR module would be a good example. Can we allow more communities to look at those metrics and learn from those metrics?
Yeah, I think that's fantastic. The one other takeaway that I had, right, is that maybe we've turned the corner on the opiate epidemic and started to improve. And you touched on that a little bit, but the data was pretty optimistic there. And maybe this fentanyl and opiate epidemic that we've all been through the last few years is just starting to show a hint of improvement, and that would be a pretty tremendous outcome as well from all the efforts on the side of opiate treatment. So pretty cool stuff. Brian, any last comments? Rabab, any last comments before we wrap it up here?
I'll turn over to Rabab. I just thanks again for letting us present. This is always a highlight. I know Rabab looks forward to this because she can have a big sigh, because the whole team has done great work. There's obviously a lot more work that's ahead, but really appreciate the opportunity to present. But I'll let Rabab have the last word because she's really allowed us to present this today in a very did a great job.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. Thank you for allowing us to present. I know the slide deck is just getting longer every year and we have more to present. So we're trying to summarize as much as we can to get through a lot more. But thank you all.
Oh, it was great. And thank you to the whole team at CARES, right? Brian, Rabab, Man, Monica, Lainey, Stephanie, Tierra, Mike, Shaharian, like all the people that we've gotten to know here at the Resuscitation Academy. We, have treasured this relationship, and it's just been fantastic to grow together. And we are looking forward to the future and where we go from here. And all those state coordinators out there, those are the people who are on the ground, just digging into the work. The state and regional coordinators really are they're the hidden heroes here, right? And they drive this effort. They drive this measurement that allows all of these agencies and areas and states to improve. And really just tremendous work on everybody's behalf. If you haven't read the report, it's available. Get out there and take a look at it. It's a really good read. Very well done, as always. And thank you, Brian, for joining us in the middle of the night where you are. I really appreciate that. Rabab, always good to talk with you. And thank you all so much. Thanks to everybody who tuned in today. We will wrap it up here, and we'll see you back in June for the next Resuscitation Academy webinar. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.